Hi there, and welcome back to my channel, Mio Chrome. First of all, I have probably said thank you a million times already, but truly, the response to my last video was unlike anything I would have ever expected. All your nice comments made me so happy, and I just wanted to say it again with my own voice, so thank you. Today's doll is something that might actually be the first idea I ever had for a doll. For the longest time I was kind of obsessed with drawing these human-insect hybrids. I think that it's totally my comfort zone when I'm blocked or just want to draw something that comes very naturally to me. So now that I customize dolls, I naturally had the urge to turn them into bugs. And I also know that one won't do it for me, and this is definitely going to be a series. One of the most striking looking and perfect bugs for this, in my opinion, is the stag beetle. I'm honestly surprised that I haven't seen a stag beetle custom yet. I'm not really going to base this off of my drawings though, and keep it more in fashion doll territory like my other ones. So looking for a base, I thought I was going to use a Frankie, but I really didn't want to lean into the blue again, so I chose Venus. This doll is going to have a lot of green, which I know is not really typical for a stag beetle, except there does exist one green one, but it is a bit differently shaped than the ones I want to reference. However, I really felt like using green, so I'm gonna do it. After cutting all of Venus's hair off and softening the vinyl head in boiling hot water, I can pull her head off. I can then pull her hair out of the neck hole using needle nose pliers. With acetone, I can remove all the paint and also the flocking that is on the side of Venus's head. I then try to clean her body up by getting rid of the mold lines and stuff like that. Of course, the main reason why the stag beetle is so cool are the antlers. I prepare 4 pieces of wire, 2 for the antlers on the outer sides and 2 on the inside for the antennae. I later decide that those should sit lower, so I made 2 unnecessary holes, but the hair will cover that up anyways, and also the vinyl will make them shrink again over time. I sculpt the antlers with epoxy sculpt, which I'm not doing that on top of the wire because I have a really hard time shaping it and making it stick on there, so I'll just pin it later. It's a lot easier when you can just roll some sausages as a base. I also very conveniently have this book that I can use as a reference. So if you're like me and you find sculpting a bit annoying because everything constantly moves while you're trying to sculpt on top of it, it really helps me to let every step cure in between as much as I need. So I made the basic shape and all the details I can then add to it without worrying, and if I'm happy with something I can just let it cure again before continuing. It does take longer of course, but for me it is still the better option because I would otherwise probably scrap the whole thing a million times. I sculpt a little bit of detail this time directly to the antennae to give it a more rounded and segmented look, and so that it doesn't look like the piece of wire it is. Now the mouth is getting some modification as well. I'm giving her these kind of fangs, but 4 of them, and instead of real fangs, I am blending them into her lips. In my mind, a lot of insect cartoon characters have the zigzag line as a mouth, but I somehow couldn't find any reference, so I might have made that up. But similar to that is definitely the P.T. Flea's mouth from A Bug's Life. I mean, I know that his is technically supposed to be a beard, but I kind of love that way of representing the mouth parts, so that's basically what this is supposed to be. I again use green stuff for the stickiness, but not gonna lie, it's still a pain to get these fangs to stick. Once they're cured, they will be pretty secure though. After sanding, I drill a hole into the antlers to glue the wire in. I place them on the head and fill in all the parts that need some adjusting with one last layer of epoxy sculpt. I'm not going to permanently attach them yet. We still have some body mods to do. Since we're doing a bug, we need 6 limbs, so I'm giving her a second set of arms. I have a second Venus with a broken leg, so she's the perfect candidate. There's this ring that holds the arm inside the body that if you can manage to cut into that and get the arm out, you won't need to cut into the arm itself. I mark where the arm is supposed to go and measure if the placement is even on both sides. Then I drill in some holes and widen them until most of the rounded part of the arm sinks in, but it shouldn't sink in completely. Since we were able to save that little piece of plastic inside of the arm, I can now use it to tie a piece of rubber band around both of them and through the body. I make sure it's tight enough and then tie a knot which I can hide inside the body. And now our second pair of arms has just as much movement as the first one, and we can move on to the hair. Most of her hair is going to be black, but I really wanted to use this beautiful green color on her. I saw this hair and pony a while ago and it's been living in my head rent-free ever since. I am placing the green parts similarly, but so that it will be more visible. After planning out how white I want the green parts to be, I paint the scalp in matching colors. I will have to add a middle part again and also add holes where the flocking used to be. The hair is not going to be super long, so I can cut the hair into 2 pieces. And while rerooting, I also add some holes along the green parts to make them more blocky, and then I only need to fill in all the rest with the black. And while I'm doing that, I'll tell you a little bit about my relationship with insects. So when I was little, I loved everything that creeps and crawls and is in some way or another disgusting. I also got a lot of stuff like that from my family, like slimy or wobbly insects, bugs that I could stick on the walls, cockroaches cast in resin, all of that fun stuff, and I loved it. I don't know if my initial interest was this strong from the beginning or if I was just really enabled. I mentioned P.T. Flea earlier. I was so obsessed with the movie A Bug's Life. It's probably my most watched movie, and I had times in my life where I would watch it every week, sometimes multiple times. I also used to catch bugs outside, and my mom's friends were always really glad to have me because I would get rid of all of their spiders and bugs in their houses. It would get problematic when I wanted to bring them inside. One time I wanted to take a spider into my friend's mom's car and she was like, absolutely not. And I was like, what do you mean? That's my pet. And yeah, one time I caught 2 spiders and one of them started eating the other and I was amazed, and my mom still talks about that sometimes. So today I still love them and I love looking at them, but I'm not so sure about the touching part anymore. Alright, hair is fully rerooted, so end of story time. I'll now put some heat and waterproof fabric glue into her head hole and spread it to all the plugs. When that's fully dried, I give her a boil wash and the first rough trim while the hair is still wet. I'm using a piece of cloth to protect the hair, and I also put in all her face elements temporarily to make sure the face-up will not clash with them. Now I had some problems with my camera focus in the beginning, so there might be some jumps, but I'll just talk over it with what I generally had in mind. As always, I use Mr. Super Clear as a base for the blushing and watercolor pencils. So for the eye shape, I wanted them to be sort of a half moon shape, so a pretty straight line at the top and rounded at the bottom. I really love drawing this eye shape. I also only give her bottom lashes. I have to do her eyebrows pretty deep set so that they will not touch the antlers, but I think that this eyebrow shape suits her really well and it makes her look very intense. When blushing, I try to layer the pastels over the mouth as much as I can to make it one color with the sculpted elements. Remember, they are supposed to blend into the lips. The eye color will be yellow, and for the pupils I knew I wanted this twinkle star shape, except that sounds cute, but it makes their face look rather scary and less human. I just don't really know how else to describe the shape. Once I know the placements won't clash with the other elements, I can remove them so that they won't bother me. When switching to acrylics, I use a really dark green and also a peachy color for the waterline. I also want the eyebrows to be pretty dark. I didn't like my first placement of the pupils, so I paint over them, which made the yellow really bright and intense, and I like it. Any shading on the iris will be orange toned, and also a black shadow under the top eyelid will give the eye a more realistic effect. In the end, I color match the mouth parts with acrylics and do some shading. And then of course there need to be some highlights in the eyes. We can't have a stag beetle without its majestic wings. Like usual, they have the flying wings and then those protective wing covers, which I learned are called Elytra, so I am going to use that word from now on to keep it simple and to sound really smart. Or like I played a lot of Minecraft apparently. I'll do the normal wings first, so here I sketched the shape and separate it into two parts so that they can fold later. I also make them overlap a bit so that I don't have any gaps. And I color code both parts because I know my stupid ass is going to confuse them. I wanted the vein parts of the wings to have this see-through quality and to really keep that structure, so my idea was to make everything with UV resin, but bulk up the veins with multiple layers. To do that, I put a plastic sheet on top of my sketch and put the resin on there. I dyed the resin in a brown shade with alcohol inks. So now I cure it and add another layer until it seems thick enough. At some point I do directly under the UV light because it spreads pretty quickly. I think there's higher viscosity UV resin, so that would probably be much better for this. When I feel like the veins are thick enough, I dye some more UV resin with yellow alcohol ink and just fill in all the in-between parts. I wanted to try it like this with only the resin to avoid the thick edges of, for example, the wobbler I used for the ice fairy wings. When I'm sure everything is cured, I can remove the wing from the plastic. The brown came out really light, but darkening it would mean that the amount of ink in the resin would be too high, so I darken up some parts of the wings with brown acrylics, painting it on the other side. But in the end the lines are too wonky for my taste and I try the whole thing again, but this time using a tiny brush. I tend to avoid brushes when working with resin because I don't want to destroy them, but it's actually not really a problem because uncured resin can easily be removed with acetone. The brush I used is still doing fine right now. This whole process actually works a lot better, so I decide to go with that method for all the parts. I also use a lighter to get rid of bubbles before curing. After painting all the dark brown details and coating the back with another layer of UV resin, the parts can be assembled. I made the part for the joints a bit thicker and I'll put these tiny nails in there. The movement looks pretty good, so I can then cut off the nail on the other side and seal it with a blob of UV resin. And of course I will color match everything. I am pretty happy with this, but I have to admit that I don't recommend this method. The wings are still pretty thin and the resin is super prone to deforming. So next time I'll either need to make it a lot thicker somehow or use something sturdy as a base. Now we'll get to the Elytra. I'm thinking this packaging would make a perfect shape for them, so everyone who subscribed for the bot bash, I'm still doing it, I'm using trash. It is a little big like this, of course, so first I cut them into 2 separate pieces. I use my wings as a reference and then push the top parts together until they fit the shoulder size but still meet exactly where I cut them off at the bottom. Once I have the perfect placement, I secure it with tape and mark the middle of each piece. Then I only need to cut along that and sand down any rough edges. I tape both pieces together to make sure nothing will move out of place, and then I make some adjustments to the shape. Now I can plan where to put the hinges. The elytra of the STAG Beetle open upwards but in an angle so that they're also open sideways. I want to recreate that, and so I'll have to install the hinges in an angle as well. So once I have decided on a placement, I need to carve 2 very deep slits into her back where I can insert one side of the hinge. I glue them in with super glue and baking powder. The wings only need to move sideways, so I'm going to make the joints with screws. I have this little box where I keep leftover screws, and after a bit of searching I found these ones that look small enough. I plan out the placement and then drill a hole into the bigger blobs of resin that I made for this purpose. They are not at all strong enough to hold the wings, so I reinforce it a bit with green stuff. Then I just need to drill holes into the shoulders and screw the wings in. Now I need to take care of the placement of the elytra, and to make sure they won't come off the hinges, I feel like tying them onto them would be the most effective and also invisible solution. I heat up a needle to make 2 holes and then tie everything together with a nylon thread. I needed to readjust it and make an additional hole, but otherwise the angle would be screwed up. There's also a little gap where one of the hinges was attached to, so I fill that in with epoxy sculpt. I then used the strongest glue I could find to glue together the hinges and elytra, and in this case it was this 2-part epoxy glue. It always amazes me how horrible this stuff smells. Saying the word elytra so much actually feels really stupid. For some reason it feels like I made that word up. Anyway, I have waited for a chance to use this green shifter paint that has this typical black, green and gold color. But I want to test the texture out first, so I paint a white surface to see how it behaves. I also do the same on black. These paints are best applied with an airbrush, but I thought I could use the brush strokes to create a very subtle texture that will make the surface look more natural. I also put the test surface next to her face because I thought about painting her antlers that color too, but wasn't sure if it matches the rest of her paint job. But I actually ended up liking it even more than I expected. So I sand the surface a bit to make the paint stick better, prime it, and then do the painting with the shifter paint. The elytra open and close pretty good, but I just really like when things snap, so I will install magnets. I don't really have a good surface to glue them on, so I thought maybe they are strong enough if they attract sideways. Like this I can glue them on with a bigger surface and also not have them stick out so much. And it actually works really well. Stag Girlie's outfit is going to be mainly black and have some large baggy pants paired with a crop top. For the pants I'm using Delightful's UV pattern. I will link all the patterns in the description. I have these old black jeans that are pretty thin, so I feel like the fabric might work on the small scale. Now that I have cut out all the pieces, I just follow the instructions, which means I have to sew the inseams together first. I make sure to press everything flat with heat, and I also seal all the edges of the fabric with glue because I'm always paranoid that it will come apart. Next I have to sew together both legs. I've talked before about my little obsession with making things functional, and at this point the thought of functioning pockets just wouldn't leave my mind. I didn't think I'd pull off modifying Delightful's pattern like this, but then I found this creator named Forest Cottage Art, and she actually has a pocket tutorial in doll scale. Her explanation was so clear and amazing that even a noob like me had no trouble following, so if you are one too, go and subscribe to her channel. Since part of the pants is already sewn, I used this sheet of plastic to create the additional pattern pieces because I can see through it. This is what the pieces look like. I'm hand stitching the first piece of the pocket in good sides together. After that I need to turn those around and top stitch over it. Next I need to sew the other piece of the pocket onto that first piece. And this already works. After finishing both pockets, I take care of the seam allowances of the pants. And then I can sew together the outer seams. A recommendation from Delightful is to sew a gathering stitch along the legs to help shape the pants later, so I'm doing that too. It's now time to put the pants on the doll and see how well they fit. They could definitely be a bit tighter around the hips, so I cut a bit of the fabric off and add a press button. And then I add some back pockets too, and for that I top stitch around all the seam allowances and then sew that onto the pants, except along the upper seam of course. Remember when it was really popular to have your fishnets showing from under your pants? Well, I'm bringing that back today. These are some old socks which I am going to use to make her a little fishnet underpants since I don't need to make full fishnets. So I take a little piece and basically just stretch it around the doll with my hands while sewing it in place along the back. I also cut off all the excess pieces along the way. In the end I pull the front and the back pieces together and sew them in place at the crotch. And there we go, it fits perfectly. Now the top. I'm taking Kristine and 7 Dresses pattern again, this time using the high waist bodice. I'm modifying that too because I want all 4 arms to fit through the armholes. The goal is to have a high neck tank top. I'll also later find out that I have no need for the back piece. The first step is sewing in the darts. And then I just glue all the seam allowances. I realized like this I have enough fabric so that I just need to add a hook closure. I add a little extension to the sleeve part so that I can attach the second closure around her neck. That one I make with this other closure thing that you can press together, which I then also shorten to fit the exact length. The matching hook I shape into place myself and then sew that onto the other side. Next is shoes, and while looking through my doll clothing stash I found these that belong to a Heath doll, and they look like Vans with flames on them, and I think they're just perfect. They don't fit the female foot mold of course, so I thought about how I could modify them to fit, but then I realized I was going about this the wrong way. So let's do a spontaneous body mod. This girl is going to be a size 14 queen. I'm using this Claude's feet because he's the only male doll I have with his arms missing, and I try to keep my complete dolls complete. I'm sawing both of their feet off and then drill holes into the stumps to pin the new feet to the legs with a piece of wire. I try to get rid of the new feet's mold lines as good as possible and also narrow the leg stump at the top so that I can connect it more seamlessly to the original leg. And then I fill everything in with epoxy sculpt. I use a lot of water to blend the parts together as much as I can. And while that cures, I will do another modification on the shoes. We do have a color scheme, and while yellow is in it, I want to turn the red parts of the flames into green ones. And I do that by simply overpainting them. I paint over the yellow parts too to make it more cohesive, and this also matches the yellow in the ice better. The green flames also get some lighter details, and the yellow ones get orange details. And the soles get a fresh layer of white. Meanwhile, the feet are cured and sanded, and I put a roughly color matched layer of paint onto them to see any imperfections, and I see there's still a lot of sanding to do. I scrape the rough parts down with an X-Acto knife and sand again, but I'm still not satisfied with the amount of bumps I can see, so I take some epoxy sculpt with a lot of water and try to level everything by pretty much massaging it in. I accept that I can't get it out sanding everything again by hand, and after that it finally looks acceptable. I actually really like these feet on her, I must say. The proportions look pretty normal if you don't compare them to their normal feet, and I love that she has angle articulation now. It also balances out her top heaviness from the forearms. Some last details are a button and a little chain on her pants. And I also need to do the pulling thing with the threads I sewed in. I'll do her hair now too, so for her I wanted pointy bangs with one section in the middle between the antennae and two longer sections left and right between antenna and antler. For her overall haircut, I wanted to make it shoulder length and also really layered and pointy. This means I have to section the hair and then one section after the other make the hair shorter and thin it out a lot by cutting into the tips. When everything is layered enough, I use my little hair straightener to give it some shape and flip the ends outward. Since I'm using nylon, the hair does have a little bit of a hard time laying flat, so normally for these kinds of hairstyles I would recommend thinner fibers, but I really wanted to use this green color, so I'll just make it work. Right now it looks more like a 70s blowout, but at this point I was about to leave for a week, so I took these rubber bands to help lay the hair flat during that time, and then I can make some more adjustments later. I thin them out a lot more and refresh the pointiness. A bit of gel also helps keep everything in place. And as a last step, I had to give her Heath's glasses as well. They were made for her. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you like this concept since I want to make a lot more bugs. I don't know if the next one is going to be one, but I might do some polls on my Instagram. So yeah, you can follow me there too. I always give small updates in my stories if you're interested what I'm up to, and consider liking and subscribing if you haven't. As always, I'm interested in what you think, so you can always talk to me and share your thoughts. I love reading everything, and I hope I will see you in my next video. Bye!